Okay, next we're going to learn about the media item properties in REAPER. Now the properties are like preferences or settings for a specific item, which makes them very flexible, as each item can be treated differently. So the way to open them is select an item, go to the menu under Item, and choose Item Properties. Or you could hit F2. But there's an even better way. Just double-click the item, and that opens up a media item properties for that item. Now, one of the things that's great about this dialog is you don't have to close it to switch items. So right now, these are the properties for the acoustic guitar, but you could switch it to the open hi-hat, and now these are those properties, or the snare, or the kick. We can also do multiple items. So if we select them all, these are the properties for all of them. But let's go back to one. We'll start with the acoustic guitar, and let's check out the properties for that item. Now it's important to understand that everything in this dialog is non-destructive, so we can't mess anything up. We can always change it afterwards, because it's not changing the file, it's just adjusting it. So let's start up here. Right over here is the position. This is where the item sits on our timeline. Based on beats, it's over here. We could change it to bar 2, hit apply, and it moves to bar 2, right on the grid. Now it's important to note you have to hit apply down here, or you can hit OK, which applies the change and then closes the window. But if you change this to bar 3 and just close the window, nothing changes. It's still on bar 2. So you have to hit apply or OK. So we can do it based on beats, based on time, or based on time code, hours, minutes, and seconds, and frames. Next, we could change our length. Right now it's 152 bars. We could change it to 1 bar. Hit apply. Now it's 1 bar long. So we could change the length right here. Now over here, we could change the fade in, or the fade out, and their curves. Now you might be wondering, why do you want to do it here? It's easy to do it right over here, right in the item. That is true, but there is one benefit. If you remember in the earlier videos about item grouping, we could group our items by holding down Shift, change their volume all together, or trim them all together, but we couldn't fade them all together. If I grab a fade, those are separate. So this is a great place to change our fades on multiple items. Right now, they're all a bit different lengths and different curves. So they don't show up here. They're grayed out, but we can still change them. We could change them to 250 milliseconds and change the curve to being a slow fade in. Hit apply, and they all change to that value. We could change it to 500 milliseconds, hit apply, and it changes to that. We'll change our curve to be linear, and they all change to that. So it's a very quick way of changing all your fades or multiple fades on your items. And it's also great when you want to fade out a song, when you know exactly how long you want the fade to be. Next, we have the snap offset right over here. Now, if you remember earlier, I explained snap offset. You can go right here, and the cursor changes, and we can move it back and forth. This is the snap offset right here. What it's basically used for is you can put it right at the beginning of a transient, like that. And then with snapping turned on, it's going to snap to this instead of the front of our item. So now if we move it, it snaps here, right here, or here, based on the snap offset, instead of the beginning of our item. But if you want to tweak it, we could tweak it right here. Put it back to 0, and it goes back over here. If we move it, that value shows up right here. Then over here, we have the item Timebase. And by default, it's set to our project default, which is set up in our project settings. Right over here is the default. So it's set to beats, position, length, and rate. And what that means is if we change the tempo of the song, right now it's set to 130, so it sounds like this. If we change it to 120, everything stretches to change to that tempo, so it sounds like this. Or if we go higher to 140, it sounds like this. But that's based on how we set it. Let's put it back to 130 and go back to our project settings. We could change it to beats position only. And now if we change the tempo to 120, the items stay on the same bars and beats position, but they don't time stretch. So the tempo changes, but the item position stays the same. And the last option is based on time, right here. If we choose this, the items aren't going to move when we change the tempo. So the grid positions will change. Let's change this to 100 and see they're not on the bar anymore, because the items are based on time, not bars and beats. So it's going to sound the same, even though we change the tempo. This is the option you want to use when dealing with video or narration, where you don't want to stretch those items or keep them on the grid, but you want to add music to it, so you create a tempo for that new music. But the default is set right here: beats, position, length, and rate. So it will stretch if we change our tempo, but we can change it based on our items. That's the purpose over here. Right now, it's set to our default, but we could change it to time or beats position only. So some of the items will stretch based on song tempo, and some of them won't. Down over here, we have the item mix behavior. This is how our items behave when we place them on top of each other, or mix them. Let's make some splits. Now let's take this item and place it in the middle of this one. By default, we're going to hear this, then this one, which makes sense. But if we move it so it's not enclosed by this one, we're going to hear both. You can kind of see, you can see both at the same time. And the same thing on the other side. If they overlap, we're going to hear both items at the same time. But if it's enclosed in the middle, we're only going to hear one. We're going to hear this, then this one, and then this one. And that's set up in the project settings. If we go to Advanced, right over here is Item Mix Behavior. And the default is enclosed items replacing closing items. But we can change it. We can choose Items Always Mix. And now we're going to hear both at the same time. So you can see them both. If it's over here, or even in the middle, we're always going to hear both items. And the last option is items always replace earlier items. So if we choose this, it's going to play them based on their order. So if we take this one and place it on top, it's going to replace the earlier item. So they go in order, but they don't trim them. This one's still here, but they fold on top of each other like stacked cards. This one's first. This one replaces it when you place it on top. Then this one replaces that one when you place that one on top. So they're stacked. But if we keep this at its default, we can change these just for certain items. Let's move this back to here. And right now, these are not going to mix when they're enclosed. But we could change that behavior just for this item. Let's choose this item and change it to Items Always Mix. Hit Apply, move it on top. Now these items always mix, even though the default was set differently. So we could change it on an item-by-item basis. Now it's important to note, none of that mixing behavior really matters if we turn on trim content behind media items when editing. It's off by default, but if we turn it on, and move this over here, it trims this one. See how it cuts it down? So the items can never mix because they're never on top of each other. They're always trimming as you place them. And personally, I prefer this mode because we're always hearing one sound on each track at a time. It makes it a bit easier to keep track of what's playing. But this option is off by default, so keep that in mind. Over here, we could choose if our item loops, and they loop by default, we could turn it off here. Like our kick track, it's looping. Right over here, you can see a loop. There's the original, and then it loops over here. If we want to turn that off, just hit it here, apply, and this item no longer loops. Turn it back on, and it does. The next option is to mute the item. Let's say on this guitar, we're not sure if we like this note over here. We could go here, split it, do the same thing over here, and take this item, go to mute, apply, and this item is muted. So now if we play it, we're not going to hear it. Now the reason for this, when you're arranging a song, you may not want to remove things permanently. Maybe later on, you might change your mind and want this note back. If you deleted it, that's a bit too permanent. So by muting it, we have the option of turning it on later. Notice the little button right there. Hit that button to unmute it. Now there's a quicker way of muting. On the PC, hold on Alt-M. On the Mac, hit Option-M. And that toggles on mute. Hit it again, it turns it off. So it's a bit quicker with the keystroke. Mute it, unmute it. But you can still see it right over here. The next option is to lock our items. Let's say we're done editing this, and we don't want to accidentally change it, move it around, put it on the wrong track. We could select it, go right here, choose lock, apply it, and this item is locked. Can't move it, put it on different tracks, can't delete it, can't shift it. So it's a great way of protecting our items. Now this is different than locking up here. This locking is more global. It's going to work for all our tracks, like our items, or preventing movement, up and down. But the locking over here is based on the item. So we can lock this one while this one is unlocked. So it's great when you're done with your drums, you don't want to change them, but you still want to edit your guitars or your bass. The next option is auto fades. By default, auto crossfades are turned on right here. So if we move an item, let's get rid of our fades. If we move this item over this one, they crossfade, because auto crossfades is turned on by default. But if you want certain items not to crossfade, just choose them, go over here, choose no auto fades, apply it, and then when you move it, it's not going to crossfade. They're going to mix. But these two items will still crossfade, because it's not changed globally, just on the item. Over here, we could change the active take. Right now there's only one take, but it can be changed from here. It's a lot quicker to do it from here using the T key, but we have the option of doing it here. Now down here, we can change the take name. This is a great place to rename our items. We can name this Keeper Acoustic Guitar, and then it changes the name of our item. Down over here, we can change the start and source. If you remember earlier, I showed you by using a modifier, Alt on the PC or Option on Mac. If you drag in here, it moves the content inside the item. Well, that's reflected in our start and source. If we change this to 0, hit apply, that's how it was originally recorded. And we moved it over here to be in time. But if you want to see it or change it manually, just change it right here. Down over here, we could change the playback rate, which happens automatically when we change the tempo, but we could also change it on the fly. When it's set to 1, it's normal. But if we change it to 1.5, it's going to play back faster. So let's hear it. Now notice when you play it back faster, it also plays back higher in pitch. That's because it changes it in proportion. And you can see it right here. Rate is 1.5, and the pitch is up +7. Now if you don't want it to change, we could choose the option right here, preserve pitch when changing rate. If we choose this, hit apply, now it just changes the rate, so the pitch should be the same. Let's make the rate slower, 0.75, and it slows it down. But it didn't change the pitch unless we turn this off. So we have that as an option. We could also change the pitch completely separately up here. Let's put this back to 1. Let's just change the pitch. Let's go up 2 semitones. It sounds like this. Or down 2 semitones, -2. So we could change them separately. Now over here, we could change the volume and the pan of our item. Now this is not to be confused with the track volume or pan, and it's also not to be confused with the option over here. See the cursor changes? We could change our volume just on this item right here. But we could also change it separately over here. Want to bring it down a few dB? Hit apply, and it brings it down. But it's completely separate from this. But they do work together. And we can do the same thing with our panning. We can change the panning to the left or the right, apply it, and it's just going to play out of that speaker. And it's going to be panned just for that item. Now over here, we have Normalize. If we choose this, it's going to bring up this volume as far as possible without clipping. So it lets us know how much headroom we have. If we click it, we can bring it up about 1.5 dB without clipping. Hit apply, and it brings it up that amount. And everything can be seen right over here. Hit Normalize, apply, you can see the volume change right here. So anytime something changes, it's going to be reflected over here. Unless nothing changes, and then it looks like this. Then down over here, we can change the channel mode. Now this track is in stereo, but if it was, we could leave it normal, we could reverse it, so the left is the right, and the right is the left. We could put it in mono, which combines the left and the right, put it in mono and only hear the left, or put it in mono and only hear the right. We could invert the phase, which is the same thing as doing it over here, flip the polarity or the phase, but we could also do it based on the item. Just choose it here, hit apply, and the phase or the polarity gets reversed. And then over here, we could choose take envelopes. Now we haven't gone through envelopes yet. I'll show you that in a bit, but just know we could set them up here. Hit this and make one for volume, pan, mute, or pitch. Then down over here, we can choose the pitch shift time stretch mode. This is the algorithm of how the sound is going to be changed or manipulated. It's set to the project default, which is in the project settings. So we could change the default here, or change it on each item right from here. Choose this one instead, change the options over here, go back to 3 Pro, choose the options over here. So we could change it based on the item. And we could also optimize each item for tonal content. Now down over here deals with the media source. This is the file that's being played in REAPER. This is the name of the file. We can't change it here, but we can change the section. The file itself starts right here, which you notice is the same as the start and source up here. So we could shift the playback start of the original file right from here. We could also change the file length. This is the original length, but let's change it to be 1 second. Now we're only seeing 1 second of it, and then it loops. Let's turn the loop off. Let's put it back. Look like this before. Change to 1 second. And we're only using the first 1 second of the file. So that can be adjusted here. But we can turn it off, and it goes back to normal. Now over here, we can reverse the file. Hit reverse, hit apply, and now it's going to play in reverse. Let's hear it. So if you want to reverse the file for a special effect, just do it right here. And we can undo it the same way. Over here, we have the properties, which are the properties of the original file. So if we hit this, we can see all the data of this original file. The length, sample rate, channels, bit depth, and so on. And over here, we could choose a new file. This is a very powerful feature. Let's say you're doing a movie with sound effects, and you want to replace a sound with a new sound. You can do it very easily from here. Just choose a new file, go to your directory, and replace it. And then you could shift it around using section or the length, and it'll change it in multiple places. So it's great for doing sound effects or even music with video. And then over here, we can rename the file, which is going to rename the file in your directory. Then down over here, we have nudge. This is a very powerful way of moving our items around. So let's choose it. And right over here, we can choose what we want to move. Let's go to position, change it by 1/2 second to the right or to the left. Change the trim to the right or the left. Change the contents to the right or the left. We can duplicate, and we can change it by milliseconds, seconds, grid units, measures in beats, or even frames, pixels, or item lengths. So it's a very flexible way of moving things around. And then finally, we have take effects. A few videos back, I showed you that, but we could also turn it on and off from here. But it's a lot quicker to do it with Shift-E. Hit it, and we can quickly add an EQ to this item. But we could also do it right from here. Add an EQ, does the same thing. There's an EQ on this item. And we could delete it right from here. So anyway, those are the media item properties in REAPER. Let's move on.